Because the natural world is culture and identity. The natural world is governance, laws, and relations. The natural world is certainly rebuilding wholeness. And so these aren't really separate categories, I don't think, and we're going to find that, and this is what's happening already. A lot of what my very brief comments already dovetail with a lot of what a number of people have already said today. I said I was biting my tongue. I wasn't, my childhood was not a traditional one. It wasn't one of living on the land very much. It was, a long dead uncle and having his bonnet and his pipe, which usually came out at Halloween, kind of. That's the way I was raised. It wasn't a traditional childhood, unless you consider me being an altar boy, a traditional, which I don't. But it was only until I returned and as a young adult to the natural world, to the land, that I began to understand and really appreciate and accept my mixed blood heritage. What's going on? I'm going to jump around a little bit, but we talked about suicide already. I want to talk very specifically about suicide. Up in Moosonee, in James Bay, in Saskatchewan, in Moose Factory, in Fort Albany, in Attawapiskat, there's been this, over the last number of years, a huge outbreak of suicide among teens. And you're asking, what does this have to do with the natural world? It has everything, I think, to do with it. These youth are isolated from, they're surrounded, it's ironic, they're surrounded by the land, and yet they're isolated from it. They've lost, many of them don't go out on the land because their parents didn't, but their grandparents did. So they're isolated from their grandparents, they're isolated from their parents. And I tie in a lot of this isolation to ridiculously high rates of suicide among teens, 10 times the national average in Moosonee and Moose Factory alone in the last number of years. And so what I've tried to do with some friends is reintroduce these young people back onto the land in the hope and the belief. And there's no scientific basis for it, but in the hope and belief that reintroducing them to the natural world, to goose hunting, to fishing, to learning how to do a gill net, to catching a fish on a rod, to making your way through rapids in a freighter canoe brings something back. And we've been doing this for the last couple of years. We're struggling, but we're doing it, and we keep fighting to do it. And we're finding that there is, it's the response is more and more kids want to come back out. More and more kids hear about it and want to get involved. And it's that kind of involvement in the natural world and reintroducing, and that I think is hugely important. And I began to question why, how does this happen? Like, what is it about the natural world that brings back something that is missing? And I was sitting chatting with an old friend. I call him an elder, and it's almost a way to tease him, but he's so bright, and he's a wonderful guy. And one time we were sitting on the river, and he looks at me and goes, Joe, there's a real, this is a deceptively simple story, but there's a real difference, a disconnection between the way the Western world looks at nature versus the Anishinaabe world. And I said, tell me more. And he goes, the Western world, and I guess it comes from Christian values, man is put onto this earth to take care of it, to not necessarily just take care of it, but we are the boss of this natural world. Everything in this world is for man's use, for people's use. So we dam rivers, we mine, we try to extract oil from tar sands. We do all of these things to the world because it's our right to do these things to the world. And I said, yeah, that makes sense. It's absolutely what's going on in Canada right now. And he goes, but the Anishinaabe worldview is absolutely the opposite. Man is not the boss. Humans are not at the top of the food chain. In fact, we're at the very bottom. Everything in the natural world we need to survive. Everything. We need water, we need rocks, we need sand, we need the air to breathe, we need the moose to eat, the fish to eat. So we are actually at the bottom, so we have to start looking at this world as a place where we are not the ones controlling. And we're seeing right now all kinds of things happening in our environment that are very, very negative and having huge impacts to us as a people, but also to everything in our world, because we're looking at it as we are the ones who control it. We don't, we can't. Katrina is a good example of our inability to control nature. We have to begin to look at the Anishinaabe view is we are thankful to everything that is on this earth. We cannot exist or survive without even missing one ingredient from that. And when we begin to look at it this way, it's a very different way of seeing.